My name's Chris. Today's session is, it's been framed as managing a micro agency. It was a bit of a and an hour on my part about how we should frame that, but it's, I suppose, small agencies, one-man teams, very small groups of people, and really just to sort of explore what it takes to do it, how the guests, which is James, Craig and Jason, how they do it, and really just to sort of share common experiences really about the whole process of different things that we'll talk about. If anybody's got any questions that they would like to ask, or any comments, or any thoughts that they'd like to throw out there, just please put them into the live chat as we go. If there are questions, I'll ask them during or at the end to the guys. But just so everybody's got an idea of who you guys are, would it be all right starting with you, James, just to give us a little bit of a background, just so people know who you are and the studio that you run?
Sure. Hello, my name is James. I run a very, very small studio called An Open Understanding, which is essentially just me in my living room. And I've been doing it now for about three years next month. But before that, I was in various design studios and inside some brands. And that's me. Brilliant.
Craig, can you do the same, please?
Yeah, I'm Craig. I run Combination. It's about a year old now. But before that, I freelanced for over 10 years at a lot of agencies in and around London and abroad. Predominantly kind of web design, but also come from like a traditional branding background and stuff like that. So I kind of take it as it comes, really. But yeah, I'm about a year in, so so far so good.
Very fresh. Jason, can you just give us a little bit of a background, please?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Jason. Hi, I run See Think Do. It's a one-man design agency. It's what I've always called it, really. Micro agency sounds a bit better though, so I might adopt that. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been doing this for 10 years now. So yeah, sort of the old bloke of the group. Doesn't mean I've got it right, but I'm sort of design of all sorts, branding, web design, print design, with a background in advertising, photography, and beyond that as well. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I wanted to start with a question really revolving around the idea of it being small, and whether that was an intentional plan from all of you, or whether it's sort of, maybe Jason, this is maybe best to start with you on this one because you've been going for a little bit longer.
Yes, it was an intention to keep it small. I've always wanted to do that. I've worked like the other guys here. I've worked in other agencies as well, freelance and full time. I helped start an agency. I was a creative director, so I've done that. And I just thought I don't want to do that again. And the real Kickstarter for me of doing what I've done was having kids, to be honest. So having a family really changed the way I wanted to work and be and have more time. And I just figured that I had more control over that if I kept it to myself and kept it small. I didn't want to be going out and building a big team. I didn't want to be at someone else's beck and call, employed by someone else anymore. And I thought I could just put more control over that envelope, if you like, with keeping it as lean as I could, and being able to, dictate my own time and my own availability, really. So that's really what I did, and I've fairly much stuck to that, and it's worked in that way very well.
And whereabouts are you in the country, Jason? Sorry,
so I'm in the southeast. I'm in Sussex. Okay. Brought up around here, moved to London many years ago. Worked in London for about 10 years, then came back.
Because there's something I've been playing around in my mind recently, is that when we're building up to this, is that wondering whether location plays a part in keeping things small, whether there's access to talent or clients, or even though you can find all of these things remotely, it's still not the same as building it physically, is it?
No, I mean, I'm lucky in that sense. I'm 45 minutes from London, so, any clients or partners in London I can get to very easily. I'm close to Brighton. I've sort of got the best of both worlds in that way. I'm not totally remote, so I don't have a staffing issue particularly. I've got loads of suppliers within an hour of me if I need them. Loads of clients hopefully as well. So
fingers crossed. Craig, because you're relatively new into the self-employment game, was that an intention of yours? Is there a vision for longer term to grow, or is it pretty much to stay as yourself and then maybe collaborate?
Yeah, I think well, I do collaborate with like developers and things, and the odd designer here and there. But I think I would like to employ a designer, and like you said about it, you know, the remote thing, you can grow it as big as you like and stuff. But I think for me, it would really only be worth it if taking someone on that I could have alongside me. We don't have to meet 5 days a week, but you know, it would be in a kind of studio environment where we would, you know, work alongside each other, or you know, be part of a kind of micro team, I guess. And I think that would be a really benefit to the whole thing. I think it's one of those things where I'm just gonna have to take the plunge soon, I think, because every time I think I'm too busy, it's too late to take someone on. And if when I'm not busy, I think what's the, you know, why it's a risk taking someone on, because what happens if the work dries up or whatever. So I guess it's at the moment it's fine with me ticking over and stuff, but there's been the odd client that might think that, you know, I'm not big enough to take on the project and stuff, but I can assure them that, you know, I can. But I think that sometimes it's, you know, you kind of got to be a bit careful about who you be honest, but also kind of, you know, be flexible in terms of the, you know, taking on staff. And I think that's why I called it combination, really, because it was working you know, a lot of agencies in London, meeting a lot of great people, and then being able to kind of pull them in to kind of work on projects on a kind of project by project basis, on kind of skills based and stuff. But I think ideally I would like to take a designer on. I keep kind of thinking, should it be more of a project director person, or a, you know, a business person, or, you know, or a developer. But I think because I'm a designer myself, you know, and all that kind of stuff, and come from that core background, I think I kind of want to give something back and kind of learn from them, but also them learn from me and stuff like that. So I think hopefully, I keep saying this, but yeah, hopefully ask me in a year, and hopefully I'll have someone on. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll do a recap in 12 months' time, see where
yeah.
James, how about you, from the perspective of starting out? Was it just you just needed to make money, so you started a business, and it was just you, and that was it, or you know, was there a grander plan in there?
I think similar to the other guys, I'd kind of seen one side of our industry, and I wanted to take the best bits and leave the bits that I didn't like so much. I also quite like running a business as well as being as a designer. But in terms of kind of like scaling, I always kind of frame it that I like put a team together based on the needs of a brief. So similar to Craig, Jason, like if I collaborate with a developer, a copywriter, a photographer, a strategist, so on and so forth, I'll just continue to do that. But at the same time, every week I change my mind, and I'm like, maybe I should rent a studio and get another designer and give an opportunity to an intern and do all these things. But I think at this stage, I feel like I'm still like building whatever it is I'm building. And then maybe one day I'll get to the stage where I'm like, okay, cool, let's hire someone, or let's get studio space, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but there's something quite tormenting in both of those, isn't there, where you've got the flexibility and you know, be quite fluid, just to sort of say, let's see where it goes. You know, in 12 months time, we might need 10 people, or might close the business. You know, I think sometimes there's this idea that business needs to be very commercial and corporate and be structured, and I suppose in some respects it would help, but from a creative perspective, if you're that way inclined, that's difficult to maintain, to have those sort of attributes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there comes a point where you realize you can only do so much, you know, like you need other brains alongside you to grow, if that's the plan that you've got. Personally, yeah, it's not, I don't think it needs to be the plan for everyone, you know, and that's why this new thing of kind of these small micro studios are growing in kind of popularity. There's loads of them now because people are realizing that they can collaborate with people more easily, and also they don't need massive overheads. And yeah, keeping it simple is actually the way forward.
Yeah, definitely. Have you found, going back to you, Jason, I think Craig touched upon it briefly then about clients' perception of thinking whether you are able to meet their needs. How have you had that, and how do you address that?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the big things, I think, in my experience, certainly of running a small agency. Clients will always have perceptions of you, and they form judgments very quickly. I mean, obviously based on your website, but reputation perhaps, and other things as well. And certainly even if they meet you, and it's difficult to break those. So, you know, if you come across as X or Y, then that's what you're often, in my experience anyway, you know, you get stuck in that pigeonhole. And certain clients will look at you, and either through, I don't know, due process and checking your background out, or company background, they'll see that you're not actually a large company and you won't be considered for certain things. So you can say what you want, and I've certainly gone from one extreme to the other. You know, I'm definitely a we at the moment, you know, a we, not a pronoun. It's a way of describing my business. But I have also been an I as well, and I have that debate. I've had that debate for the last X years, definitely 10 years probably. And sometimes I have a split personality, so I can be an I to one client and I can be a we to another client. And I think it's okay. I think as long as, one of the guys said honesty is an interesting word, because I am honest, but I'm also slightly like, you know, I have a team. Yeah, I do have a team. I just don't employ them. I don't pay them weekly, monthly. I pay them when I need them. So, you know, as long as that's explained at some point, I think clients are more open to more possibilities of working with smaller companies, in my experience. And I think apart from anything, it is the sort of remote working thing due to the pandemic. It has changed things. It hasn't changed my way of working at all, but it's changed many people. So you look at all the backgrounds we have, and you probably spent a lot more time curating your backgrounds than I did. But you know, it's okay, right? You can be in your bedroom and run a studio, whereas 5 years ago that wouldn't have been common, and everyone would have had a fake brick wall behind you. If you had to have a video call, you would have had a brick wall behind you. You know, so perception has changed in the last few years, and I think it makes it more acceptable, and more accepted. Clients sometimes are at home still, and it's democratized the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, and do you think that perception is our responsibility to make that clear to a client? Because it is easy to create a false identity, isn't it, that you are larger. I
think it's less important, I would say. I mean, it is a responsibility in a way, but I think it's less important. I think that the responsibility is knowing that you can do the work, proving you can do the work, having the skills and the network to do the work, and proving it. And once you can do that, it's less important. I don't think it matters. To some particular niches of client, it does matter, and that might not be the best target for a micro agency to go for. And some people will say, I'm sure the other guys might have had it. If you've had a rejection, well, you're not big enough company, and you don't have the numbers behind you and the team and in a way that they're comfortable with. I've certainly have had that, but I think that's okay too, because it's about finding the level of work and client, and in terms of scale, size, ambition, it's all important. That match has got to be right. Yeah.
And Craig, as a new business, have you encountered that yet? The perception side of things.
Well, because a lot of my work comes through recommendations or kind of through friends and word of mouth and stuff. I guess they might have already made their mind up before they speak to me, because whoever's told them has kind of said, that I'm a nice person and I'm good at maybe that what I do, hopefully. But I think the big or small project, but the only I've only recently, I guess they'll probably tell you probably don't get to know this stuff because they don't commission you, because they probably wouldn't tell you to your face you're not big enough. So I guess the only kind of thing I've had like that recently was my brother worked up until last week for a massive restaurant chain, and he recommended me for the process of redesigning their website. So I went through a couple of Zoom calls with them and stuff, and then had to fill out. Well, I've not filled it out the deadlines this week, but you know, it was probably easier to apply for a university degree than fill this form out I've got to fill out. But a lot of my work, you know, it's a bit more lo-fi in terms of the contract or like the due diligence, I guess. But it started to ask me questions about, you know, turnover and staff members and stuff. I guess because I'm competing against bigger agencies. I think Pearl Fisher had done the rebrand of the restaurant chain recently. So I think they're kind of used to that, but they didn't necessarily tell me that I wasn't big enough or couldn't take on the work to my face. My brother told me kind of offline that his colleague kind of had murmurs that, you know, maybe I wasn't necessarily capable, sort of thing. So not to my face, but it's more kind of, again, through word of mouth, but the other way around. So yeah, I've still to fill the form out yet or complete it, so we'll see. But I kind of assured them, you know, and stuff. But you know, that's up to them. I guess it will probably come down to the money at the end of the day, whether it's rather than whether I can actually, you know, commit to the job or not. But yeah, I don't know if I'll complete the form. It's kind of it's one of those things. It's so big, and it would take me a day to fill it out. And it's kind of like, well, that means I'm not working, or you know, I guess you don't kind of factor in those kind of timings or those things when you kind of planning your week, or you know, thinking that you're running your own agency and stuff. It's like going to all these meetings and things. It's a bit like, well, who's going to do the design? You know, who's spinning those plates, sort of thing.
Also, when you're small, what I've found is that the most powerful thing. If anyone would have said this to me when I first started out, I would have just not listened at all. But the idea of not taking on some things is probably more beneficial, because even though it looks like an incredibly big opportunity, you know, you could probably get your name out there and make lots of money. If anything in that process goes wrong, you know, you could be liable for a lot of, you know, even just shutting you down, because it can just take over your whole world. And if you've got to commit like financially to something, you know, beforehand, that you can, you know, all these different sorts of things that sometimes I think stepping away and saying no is really important in a small business, because, you know, I think positioning yourself, that perception, if you position yourself in a certain area where you can attract clients that you can handle and manage professionally and, you know, effectively, efficiently, is really important, as opposed to maybe always shooting for the big boys, because there's a perception in our industry that that's really what we should all be doing, you know, working for Nike and, you know, Amazon and all these sort of companies, as opposed to finding people that fit your abilities and working methods and all those sorts of things. James, about you from a perception perspective, I see, without blowing smoke up your backside, I sort of see your work regularly and look at your site and think that is a bigger studio than one person. There's no way one person can produce that, you know, that level of work and that quality of work. Do you get people approaching you and you just sort of have to sort of say no? Do you, you know, is there a point where you get to a stage where you're maybe reflecting to people that you are bigger, and they're then confused when they realise it's just you? Or does any of those conversations happen?
I'm trying to articulate this answer properly. And I don't, to be honest, a bit like Craig, I never speak to big companies like that are. I think like I'm trying to get into a space where I just work with like small to medium sized businesses, and that's just what I do. I'd never like pitch for something that I just know was out of my league. There's just no point. And like you said, Chris, like the stress that comes with that, it's just not what I'm about. It's not what I'm here for. And I think like the reason that I even like named the studio An Open Understanding is to have this very clear discussion with people where it's like, you just get me, basically. That's all it is. There is no studio, there is no team, there is no project manager, there is no account manager. It's you just chat to me every day, basically. And that for a lot of people works. In Craig's position there, like those big brands that are used to working with these gigantic stupid agencies that overcharge you and muck you around and take months to do something, is exactly why I'm doing my own thing and not letting someone else.
So do you think that there's something in that where clients have had bad experiences with places or people and maybe been overcharged and it's taken forever, and they're naturally wary about working with smaller people because they think if a big team does that, and what's one person on their own going to be like? When I think most of us know that you're probably far more effective being on your own than you would be, with a giant global studio, maybe.
I mean, there's something to be said for both, right? But I think running a small thing is very, very, very different to running a slightly bigger thing and a really big thing. We're just in like completely different categories, and that's a good thing. Like, let those guys do the Netflix and the Nikes and the whatever, and let us do the smaller things that aren't enough money for them because they need to pay for a team and a studio space and have like bigger overheads. But for us is like, oh sweet, that's just paid for my like summer.
Yeah.
Like you just got to keep it simple, I think.
Yeah. Jason, have you had anybody or clients come to you with expectations of, they might have seen work from a giant agency, and they're expecting that, because the education isn't always there, is it, in terms of being maybe as transparent as what we could be? So do clients maybe come with you with an idea that they're going to be getting this 30-man deep dive into branding?
I hope not. And if they have done, they didn't last long. I mean, I probably, to be fair, I think like the guys, you wouldn't let them through the door really, or they wouldn't even let you on the pitch list, because I've been intimidated by those project sort of forms and RFPs and whatever, and they're aimed at larger agencies, and the processes from them are aimed at larger agencies. So if a client comes, or if a prospect comes to me and wants me to fill in one of those, I'm already, the alarm bells ring, to be honest. And so I generally don't. I mean, I do, and I have. When I've worked with quite a lot of local authorities and charities in my history, and they can be quite process driven for good reason, I suppose, but that often slightly sidelines smaller providers like my agency. So they generally filter themselves and don't expect that. I don't think I promised that. I've recently redone my website, and slightly more and slightly bigger and slightly more like that, but not, I don't have 30 pictures of people and a dog on my website yet. I might do, but no, I won't.
Yeah, I don't know where that trend started. I'd love to know where the origins of the dog thing. There's a lot of studios with dogs on their websites. From a perspective of finding new business, Craig, you touched upon it slightly there about, word of mouth or referral. I've always found that to be the most powerful. I've spent thousands on marketing in the past and never seen anything return from it. But, you could have somebody that just leaves a role and goes to, to join another business, and they take you with them. But is that really how you go about finding most of your projects?
Yeah, I think I had the pleasure of working at, the best agencies in London, I guess, and whether that's people then moving in brands in-house, or me just drinking pints around London and meeting new people after work in different parts of town while I've freelanced at these different places. You kind of never know when you're going to meet these people again, and that's what I love about our industry, about how it's so big but at the same time so small, and I'm working with a client at the moment with someone that I worked with at Wolf Hollins, and then they kind of recommended me to this place they were working at, and I've done a couple of websites for them now and stuff. So I guess it's all very tangled up, but they kind of, sometimes it just becomes very clear, and I don't know whether that's through me just posting the odd thing on social media and now and again, and it catching people's eye, or I don't know what the kind of triggers are for people to kind of think, oh, Craig would be good at that sort of thing. So I don't know the true answer to that. I know that that's that's how it's working at the moment. I know James uses them as well, but we speak to this company called Alfie. I don't know if you know them. They're kind of like a new business machine that a lot of the big agencies use and stuff. And I've signed up to a couple of these things, and I've got close on a couple of times, but I've never. I kind of try not to put too much time and energy into that sort of stuff because it's not quite worked just yet. I don't know if James has cracked them yet, but we're up against the Kotos and the Made Forts and stuff, and so that's quite tough when it comes to stuff like that. But I guess it does get bracketed into pillars of money and stuff, and kind of like price ranges and stuff. So I don't think we'd always be up against those. It would probably be me and James up against each other, really, or Jason as well. So yeah, but we're all friends, I think I've had opportunities where I've collaborated with other people on projects and stuff, and I think when I first started working, that would never have been an option at the agency that I was at. I just don't think they would have done it. But I think because the way it's changed a lot now. I think people are just a lot more open and a lot more kind of willing to kind of share the flavor of it, really, and kind of create something that's great with other like-minded people and stuff. And especially with us as small people, we don't necessarily have the 10 different hats or skill sets and stuff. So I think it's good when two micro or two kind of small agencies or a big and a small kind of come together and see what results they get at the end of it and stuff. And I think that's what I'd say. But yeah,
James, from your perspective on the finding clients and new business, is that a similar sort of story to Craig's? Is there other techniques or methods in there that you use?
Yeah, very similar within reason. I think, to Craig's point, like a lot of work has come from like old colleagues, friends, or people I've worked with in the past who've moved into places. But I think last year I started like tracking where everything kind of comes from, even if I lose it. And a lot of it comes through just being on Twitter, which sounds maybe nuts, but a lot of the like word of mouth stuff has come through there. And some of the like biggest projects I've done have definitely come through people I've never met and possibly don't know anyone that I know. But we've just been chatting on the old internet for several years together. And then some of it comes through other streams, revenue streams. But I try and like keep a track of like where things come from, just so I can make sure I don't put too much time where it's getting wasted, or maybe put some time in where I'm missing out on stuff and I'm like, I should be getting that, why am I not? What can I change to do that? But I think there's no there's a guy called Mike Smith said the other day, there is no like secret sauce. You just you maybe find a formula that works for you once or twice and you go on a bit of a roll. Or like me this year, I just keep missing out on stuff. And right now I'm not sure why, but there is no exact method to the madness.
But I think that's the pure pleasure of doing it yourself, is that you can sort of stick to your own, whatever it might be, moral compass, or just being authentic, or you can find your own place. And because it's, you're representing only you can create a business to basically be an extension of yourself, isn't it?
I think you realize as well, even after doing it for a few weeks, that everyone's just making it up as they go along. And so are the big guys. They might look like they have their formula written down perfectly and articulated really well, but if they lose a few things, they'll change that. So everyone's making it up as they go along, I think.
Yeah, I can certainly vouch for that. Jason, I'm interested in the motivational sort of side of running your own business, or especially a studio. How you keep that going? How do you keep getting up and doing it time and time again? Because it can be a very lonely space to be in, can't it?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I'm probably on the the introverted side of the spectrum, so it's lonely, but it's me in power as well. You're turning that into a positive. I can get up and hopefully a little bit have the power to change things and make it better. So it sort of feeds me in a way that if I was in a company of 50 again, I'd be a little bit demotivated by that in some way. So it's, for me, it's positive. And then the other thing is, I'm trite, but I just love most of what I do. The creative part of what I do, I love. So, that's what I want to do, and I don't really want to do anything else. So it's quite easy to be motivated in that way, to actually get up and try and do it better and find someone else to do it for. So, yeah, I'm fairly self-motivated. I mean, there are bits around the edge that I'm not so motivated about. I'm like, I think James said he was quite business minded. That's the sort of bit of me that's the bit of me that I know that doesn't motivate me. Accounts don't motivate me, and stuff like that. The procedural side of it, not so much. I've learned to love some of it, but that and get on with it. But
yeah, have you had times where you feel like you're losing control of the creative side? When things start to grow, and even by keeping it to a one man, things still naturally get bigger, don't they? More responsibilities and all these sorts of things. You feel like you're a professional emailer at times.
A little bit of that, and again, it's definitely it's more like a push as to why I would never go back to doing it the other way. I would never go back into a senior creative role in an agency where you literally are in meetings and emails all day, and an executive creative director type thing. Because what I do, I am by de facto, I have to be the creative director of everything that I put out, whether I've done it or not. So I do most of it, but there are certain elements that I don't, like the other guys. You outsource bits of it, and you don't do that skill. I'm not a web developer, I'm not an illustrator. There are certain things that I'm not a copywriter, certain things I won't do, can't do, that I have to be the creative director for it. Also, it's not easy always, but it's essential, I think, that you do that, and usually it's a pleasure and fine, because I'm a bit OCD, like to keep control of the quality of it, I suppose, and that I, the decisions are the right ones for the client. So yeah, no, it's not too bad. Even with the biggest projects I've worked on, it gets a little bit more stretched. You're emailing a lot, and you're in and out a lot of it, rather than doing it in the middle. So it's not the best bit of the business for me, but it's also fun. So a little bit of that's good, but I wouldn't want to do that all day.
Yeah, definitely. Craig, have you experienced that since what does it say, a year old, the business? Have you found the motivational thing, it's still fresh and it's still exciting, or have you had moments?
Yeah, no, I do get the odd email about kind of going back into places and stuff, from going back more to agency side and stuff. And I do kind of do the odd thing, but it's generally only if it's a pal that's working at the agency or whatever. And I just make sure that it's not me going to be going to my desk at 9 a.m. and stuff. I work for other people. I've got other clients. I've got a life. So it's kind of, as long as it's on my terms, then from the outset, then I think it comes down to kind of schedules and things and timings and stuff, really. But yeah, I think generally I've worked with, the kind of few clients I've worked with in the last year and stuff, it's been pretty good in terms of there being kind of similar approach or kind of similar mentality to the project or kind of their company as well. So I haven't found any kind of frictions or kind of not being able to kind of get out of bed in the morning, and things like that. I think because it's all still new, I think, you do get that kind of pressure of it being through word of mouth and stuff, maybe, and being through a friend, maybe there's different kind of things that you would, when you work for an agency, you don't necessarily have that pressure. It's different pressures, I guess. But I think I think maybe I'm kind of going off on a different thing here, but I guess the kind of the way that you kind of approach the project or the kind of your week is very different to running your own thing, or working full time at a place, or even freelancing, because you have to do a certain job a certain way, or whether it's your way or their way and stuff. So I think every project's different as well, even if you've got your own kind of, because the client's different, I guess you can kind of have your process, but it might not fit into their kind of, depends how big they are and stuff, or kind of understanding they are in terms of the situation, I guess. So I think, but to answer to your question, I'm still loving it. So yeah.
That's a good sign. I found it, when I first started working for myself, I found it really empowering, because it allowed me to understand so much more about the whole process now. I wasn't just sat in front of a Mac churning out, a project for a client. It was understanding about, building that relationship, communicating with a client, getting to even do paperwork, which sounds really tedious, but it was sort of like those little wins, and it was actually celebrate all of those. Invoiced £100 the first time. It was like, wow, I'd earned that. You know what I mean? And it was sort of trying to take that as a big moment in the sort of progression of what I wanted to achieve. And that was my motivation. And James, for anybody that doesn't know, James joined me last year for a talk about mental health. It was specifically about InDesign, naturally. But have you found motivation difficult because of outside noises, or has it helped in some sort of way? Has it been a positive or a negative for you?
Deep question. I think it's massively helped me personally, doing things on my own. But at the same time, there are moments where, you don't have anyone else to like hand it off to and be like, can you do this? Or like, can you present this? Or can you deal with this person? But I'd saying that I haven't really had to deal with anyone. So yeah, no, for me, it works better. Like, it's a better balance of like work and life. But at the same time, the highs are really high and the lows are pretty low. But I quite like sitting here on my own and just getting on with it. Yeah.
Did you ever have that moment where it would be nice just to be able to have a sounding board or somebody to share stupid ideas? But when those things that just naturally pop up in your brain, and you sort of just, that's when it can start to spiral when you're just thinking about it yourself.
I think it's true. Like, you do need people, and that's why I think it's so important to have some kind of like industry experience, because it's not just about the experience you learn as an actual designer, but just working alongside other people is really important. But I think I have that in just like friends or collaborators that I work with. Like, it's not all serious all the time. Sometimes just send people stuff.
Do you have people outside of design that help you from the business perspective, say accountants, people that you can fall upon? You don't talk to them on a daily basis, but when you need them for advice or support, because I find that network is really important and not really spoke about too much.
Yeah, I think professional help is good. Accountants, definitely recommend an accountant. And personally speaking, it's not my area of pleasure at all, looking at numbers. So any professional help can give you a different perspective on your business, be that a professional network that may be connected to the creative industries, but doesn't have to be. I'm in a few networks that are sort of, more freelancer based, if you like, but that are multidisciplinary and not just to do with design, let's say. And that really helps, because they can bring those guys and people can bring a real different perspective into things that I face in my business, and not in a they don't compete in any way. They're sort of, just out there doing other things. So, and also useful to find collaborators as well. So professional networks definitely are useful for that, like almost co-mentoring as well. There's a lot of things I read about that. I've not gone down that route yet, but actually finding people that you can talk to on a regular basis and commit to doing it, maybe about your business and the problems that you have and how they've solved it and how you might help them and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Jace, when I think about it, because you've been going for a decade, that's a success story in itself. Boundaries. It's something that, again, it's you hear a lot of noise about it and people saying, don't do this, don't do that. Do you have a sort of process that you set boundaries with clients beforehand, so you're not answering the phone on a Sunday night, or you're not doing certain things? Is it like more of a strict, this is a 9 to 5, even if you don't actually work those hours? We all work a lot longer probably than what we should do or earlier. But from a client's perspective, do you set a series of limits and what is and isn't achievable?
I don't really. I've never had that problem. I know. I do read about people having that problem with clients calling me and texting me on WhatsApp and on Sunday, and it's like, really? I've never had that. Maybe it's a designer's thing. I don't know. It's been, relatively speaking, much more contained within a normal working week, within the bounds that I want to work. Generally done at my own pace. There's obviously a deadline, and you've got to work to that. So sometimes one works late, you do all night, you do whatever. You might work at the weekend. That happens. And when you get a bigger project, you'll have more of that. But generally speaking, clients are good. I'm always quicker to respond to their emails than they are to mine, and I'd like to keep it that way. So that tends to keep them on their toes. If you mess around and don't contact clients for ages, I think they can get a bit jumpy. But generally speaking, I'm very quick to just put holding email or message or whatever. So yeah, Slack messages pop up occasionally after hours, but I never had that problem. I think it would be a big red flag if I did have a client who started to do that. I wouldn't really want to be involved with a client that was bothering me all hours, that's for sure.
I'll say, lucky you. Maybe it's the way that I do things, but I get don't ever give a client your mobile number. That's it. WhatsApp, it's the worst thing ever. Yeah. I've had to step away from certain relationships because it just gets so intense. I think they just take liberties but I think it was my fault in the first place. That's the problem.
Maybe I'm just cold and standoffish. I don't
know. Craig, have you experienced this since starting solo?
Only clients in the music industry and fashion for some reason. I don't know why. They seem to love the WhatsApp and stuff. I'm pretty traditional in terms of like email and letter and stuff like that. No, not letter. But yeah, I think maybe it's just the younger people, or like a lot of the project managers, or not necessarily like the client, like the head person, or like the proper decision maker. Maybe not so much. It's generally been like project managers and stuff that might have been texting me. I don't know how they get my number and stuff, but it's kind of like, I don't even have like WhatsApp installed on my laptop. I kind of try and install it and stuff because they send you something and then you've got to try and open it on your phone, and then you've got to open your laptop and stuff. But I get the odd one where that it's kind of out, not it's not midnight and stuff, but I guess like, you kind of, one thing I did do in the kind of first lockdown was I used to have my emails come up on my phone and stuff, even like, newsletters and stuff and all sorts of stuff. So it'd be pinging off like all the time. But I've kind of taken all that sort of stuff. I have to go into the app to kind of like see the messages and stuff. So I think that's a good thing. And certain Slack groups and stuff I mute or don't have on my phone and stuff, because I think it makes it kind of there is a line, and I guess even if the client's trying to contact you and stuff, you can still kind of like mute these things or turn them off and stuff. So I guess not to a point where it's been like I know if I do, I'll text them back saying I'm in the pub, mate. So what do you want me to do? So yeah.
I think there's another probably not for today, but another conversation to be up there about distractions. I think that's a very valid and good point, especially when you're working on your own. It's so easy just to get lost. You can spend half a day just updating social media, and before you know it, you're behind on
doing your washing. Yeah.
Even more, yeah. But I mean, that's quite up as well. From the working from home thing, it's again distractions of just day-to-day life getting away. You're losing a lot of time when it's more effectively spent.
I do go into an office. I've got an office space in town, and I do. Sometimes I think that I do get less work done when I go there because it's more. It's kind of like an open plan co-working thing. I've got my own desk and stuff, but that you one of your questions a couple of questions ago about kind of validating things or kind of showing people other stuff and things like that. I think I kind of get some of that from just the other designers that you know are in and around me on the desks around me and stuff. They'll walk past, or I'll walk past them and see stuff over the shoulder and stuff, and I always have that kind of not banter, but just kind of chat about, do you think this is any good, or you know, or have you thought of this, or you know, all that kind of stuff. But I think yeah, it's going back to that sort of stuff. I think it's, if we were on our own in a dark room doing this stuff all day, even with all the experience that we have and stuff, I think it's always good to share a bit of that, just to kind of sense test some of this stuff, to, you know, make sure that we're doing the right thing, even though we know we're doing the right thing, I guess.
Yeah. James, I might be completely wrong, but do I recall a message on Twitter, a post, sorry, about don't give out your numbers to someone? Was that you?
It was me, but it was just advice.
What was your experience that led to that?
No, I'm pretty strict, to be honest. I stop work at about 4 o'clock. I don't work Fridays. I never work in the evening unless I've got a call with someone in like America, which at the moment doesn't happen that much. And I never work weekends. No chance.
Yeah, I'm the same.
It's literally the whole reason to do this, is to not go back to that whole feeling of like, oh, I have to get this done, so I'm going to work late. Like, go home, have a night off, tackle it tomorrow with like a fresh head. I think it is really difficult, and like, I don't turn my notifications off, which I probably should do. I'd probably have a much better life if I didn't. But I think when you're running your own thing, you're always on anyway, kind of like you're always thinking about something. Your brain is always at work. It's really hard to switch off. So I'd let the notifications in, but Craig's, that is good advice. I will try that.
I think that's a good point, though, is that the idea that you say that you don't work weekends and you don't do Fridays, but what you allude to is really true, is that you don't stop thinking about it. So you are effectively working, just because you're not bashing out designs all the time. You're still working on, you know, when the accounts are needed to be done, who's not paid invoices. How do you sort of communicate what you're doing? You got to build a new website. You got to, you know, keep on working at your own brand. Those sort of mental thoughts, they never go away, do they? So we are still effectively working. It's just not, you know, not creating the stuff. It's about thinking about creating the stuff.
Yeah, and that's why you charge what you charge. You're always thinking about it. Like, even if it's like, how good can you make it? You know, and it hasn't even started yet. Like, as soon as a new brief comes in, even if I don't win it, I'm probably thinking about what it could look like. And I think that's the same if you have a full-time job as well. Like, maybe you do have a better off switch, but when you get to a certain level, you're kind of always thinking about the thing that's on at the moment, right? In some way.
Yeah. And I think that's good, though. And I think that also should allow you to have the time off when you want to. So to give yourself a break, I know I do, you clearly do, give yourself a break to do not a lot for a day and go to the beach and go fossil hunting, which I'm doing this afternoon. So, you know, it's fine, right? You can do that, because that's one of the reasons, yeah, you're right. You set up the business on your own, keep it small so you can control it. You have to be big enough and grown up enough to understand how you do that, and when you have to work and when you're not. And if you want to take a day off, you take a day off, as long as that doesn't impact the client in any way. People often say, how do you have a holiday? Well, you just take a holiday, don't you? I mean, it's not rocket science. You take a holiday and you have a network of people, and that's how you manage it. And sometimes you do it abroad, and sometimes you work projects out so you finish them before you go, and you know, you field a couple of emails, and it's not been that hard so far.
Yeah, also the reverse of that, which I found out to my own detriment, is just extreme burnout to a point where you can't literally get your body off the bed for weeks. You know, I think sometimes you don't want anybody else to experience that, but sometimes I think you have to go through those things as someone that works for themselves, where you literally got all of the weight to make this stuff actually tick and pay the bills and all that. You've got to go through that bad sort of side of things to then make you check you back in and sort of say, taking a break. So I shouldn't feel guilty about that on a day off, for walking your kids to school. You know, it's a privilege. It shouldn't be a burden. So it's I think what James has alluded to a few times, the reason why he does what he does is to have that privilege of, doing it better than what he was ever employed to do it. If we don't learn from past failures or experiences, then don't really get anywhere, do we? I wanted to talk about something a little bit more formal. Is the structure which you guys set up on the entity, or whatever you want to call it, the limited sole trader partnership. Which route did you guys go down, and why? Actually, I'm laying that anybody. Greg, can you start us off?
Well, I've been a limited company for just over 10 years, but it was more, I went that way because a friend who was a freelancer and a couple of years ahead of me almost kind of recommended it, and I didn't really think twice about it, and also VAT registered and stuff, so from the start really. So I don't really know any other way. So I've always kind of it's been good keeping, the business account is separate to my kind of personal stuff and things like that. So yeah, I think also kind of trading off my own name. I think I've seen it in the chat anyway, and you might even get to it and stuff. I'm in the process of merging the two, or kind of changing over. So it's just one company name rather than my name being the kind of name. I did think that I think there's bigger agencies or bigger kind of designers out there who did it, in the 90s and 2000s, that kind of trade off their name and all that kind of stuff. I just felt like it was time to put that to one side and kind of start something new that was more of a kind of pseudonym name to kind of what I was trying to get at, really. But yeah, sole trade, limited company, VAT registered. And
then you just charge, invoice as the company, it gets put into a separate account, and then you pay yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes I charge up front, some of the 50% up front of the project as well. That's when it's kind of brand new clients and stuff like that. That's a good test to see kind of if they're going to put the money where the mouth is, really, in terms of kind of paying you and stuff, I guess. I've fortunately never really had super really bad problems with people chasing money and stuff, so I've been fortunate in that kind of sense. But I think we've heard all these things before. Some clients just pay that day when you send the invoice, and some wait till the 30 days. I put 7 days on my invoice. Sometimes it gets paid then, sometimes it doesn't. It depends.
I used to, when I first started out, it's sort of similar story, but now it seems to be like suppliers will pay some up front, some will pay 72 days later, and it's like when you're pulling your hair, it just seems to be just the way that some businesses seem to operate. I think the larger they get, a bit of cliche, the worse they seem to be on with time and stuff. I'm sure this is probably a similar story for everybody, but James, what's your structure like?
Limited company, VAT registered, charge at least 25% up front, don't start any work until the invoice comes in, and then the invoices are structured around the deliverables or phases. So I normally work to a 3-phased process on most projects. So at the end of phase 1, they pay another invoice. At the end of phase 3, they pay the final invoice. It's pretty simple. And yeah, Craig, not really had any problems because I'm quite strict with it. There's been a few delays over the years, but they pay eventually. And I don't work with people again if they don't pay an invoice over 60 days, which has happened twice. But it's better off to not work with people like that. If you're in the luxury of being in that position where you can do that. Yeah. But to Jason's point as well, an accountant is literally invaluable. I work with a company called Fizz, and after having an accountant working in the Netherlands, they are literally incredible. Mainly because you can just ask them questions if you want to, and they articulate them really well and help you make sense of it to the level that you want. Again, as Jason said, I don't really want to get good at being an accountant, but it's nice to kind of know what's happening and like be aware of what's happening. So I try and keep a little bit on top of it, but the accountant does the rest.
Yeah, and again, I'll hark back to my own experience, but when I first started, I was really scared about accounts. I was doing something wrong all the time. I was going to get locked up. You get the old brown envelopes, pop through the door, and you start, fearing the worst when you see HMRC at the top and all that. But the accountants really alleviated that. Well, when I found the right one, someone that was connected with personally as well as professionally, really did help break down those, demystify a lot of that nonsense, that jargon.
Get them to do the hard work, because it's just everything from HMRC is worded in such a way that is very confusing and very scary. So just pay someone like 200 quid a month to just do it for you.
Why don't they just put them in like nice coloured envelopes or something? Stop all like the drab scariness. They could just put them in flowery envelopes or something. It could be much more fun. Jason, how about you from a structural perspective?
Well, I'm different actually. I stayed as a sole trader all my freelance career, and possibly considered limited, but every time I've considered it and spoken to someone about it, the last time I considered it was about 5 years ago. The accountant said, just don't bother, there's no point. If you plans to scale the business, you're not going to employ anyone. The tax breaks are not what they were at that time. His advice certainly was just don't do it. So I've stayed away from it. Not sure if it's hindered me. I'm sure some clients might have a perceptual difference between a limited company and not, I think. I am VAT registered now. It wasn't always, just a threshold thing. And that's fine, to be honest. VAT people are worse than self-assessment tax people, although, so they're very sharp on their deadlines. So watch that. But yeah, that's me.
What was that? I think that used to be, was it about 75,000, was it? Annual?
Yeah, it's about 80 something, I think now.
Okay.
80 something thousand threshold.
Because you can do it way before that, can't you? But I think it's sort of...
You can manually VAT register if you want to at any point. You don't have to wait. And there used to be great benefits in that tax reasons, but they don't exist really so much anymore. They're not really as good.
Yeah,
and
I think
you don't have to.
The major difference, I think, for limited that appealed to me was, I think it was just the liability for what you might lose if things go wrong. I think that was the main thing. I think it becomes a responsibility of the business as opposed to a personal responsibility, doesn't it, from a sole trader, I think. But yeah, again, good to get accountants to advise much more effectively than that. Let me just have a look at these questions before I notice that owl went very fast. Jenny's just asked a question about naming the business. That's just something I've thought about quite a lot, actually. So she's currently freelance, working under her own name. Like Jason, I sometimes use I or we. But do you think it's better to have a studio name? Might be better to promote how I work collaboratively. Sorry, Jenny, I might have read that wrong. But do you think, is there something, perception again, if you as a freelancer or somebody that maybe leads with their name, so it's very clearly just you on your own, compared to we're all self-employed, but we use a studio title, or we have a bit more of an alternative business name. Does that look different, do you think, to people in terms of willingness to work with you, in terms of perception of size, professionalism potentially? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it does. I set out from day one with a name, a studio name, and it sort of seemed natural to me. That was where I'd come from, working in design studios and ad agencies, and they generally had names that weren't like people's names. As Craig said, if you have a big name in your own right over time, maybe that's a valid route. Maybe you're very niche at what you do and you do one thing and you do it really well. And I think your name might have some more currency than that. But I sort of thought that it might attract a slightly broader type of client and slightly bigger, slight aspirational thing for me to try and attract slightly bigger clients than I would normally get as just a freelance contractor or something like that. So for me, a name was right. I think it still is. I don't think I'd go back to being myself now.
Yeah, I think maybe it does associate with maybe freelance, doesn't it? It has, even though there's no solid definition, I don't suppose, it does seem to relate to people that might be freelancing for other studios as opposed to maybe finding their own clients. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about that. I think if you're on the freelance circuit working at agencies, then I would definitely just go with my name. I think it has more gravitas and stuff, and it will, you know, it's probably easier for people to remember you as your name as well and stuff. And I think, but if I guess if I met someone at a party or something and tried to explain, I'd probably still say I was a freelancer, even though I'm probably not. You know, I run my own agency, I guess. So it's kind of like that point where you kind of decide how you're going to kind of portray yourself, or kind of write down, you know, your kind of details, I guess. I think for me, that you could still freelance for yourself and have direct clients, but for me, the kind of the point of return is the kind of having your own clients. I don't know. That's just my kind of thoughts on it, really. From my experience, I guess, more than anything. So yeah, I think your own name when you're working for agencies. I think that was, and then something else maybe when you're not.
Yeah, I think also that there's, even though you choose a studio title or a business name, however we word it, and it can just be you. It doesn't mean that you just want to be represented, everybody to know that that's just. It's like it's more of a case of like, this is a professional business, isn't it? It feels like you're sort of giving it a bit more of a position to sort of succeed potentially, as opposed to people just referencing it as any one individual, because you know, you never know what happens in future, where it goes. And if you do start to look to employ people, then it probably sits a bit better, doesn't it?
I think you've kind of got two names. I guess it'd be interesting to see what the other guys do in terms of what their company is called in Company's House, as opposed to kind of like what it says on the top of their website and stuff. Like, how is it the same thing, or is it, you know, is it you? Well, James, is yours the same?
Mine's the same. There's no secrets here.
So it's, yeah. So Open Understanding Limited.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's it. That's me.
Again, I think that's an important conversation to have, though, isn't it? Is that you can do that. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be. Mine's different because we have different things going on underneath one umbrella. But you just position it for whatever the audience that you're speaking to. You know, if it's a certain type of client, or if you're doing something with a different demographic, then you can have different sort of lead names. It all just gets paid into the same place at the end of it, isn't it? As long as you don't have a bit of a funny name, like, you know, like the Lock Stock. I can't remember what it's called. The company that they said they're on about setting up, which is you know, it can come back to bite you on the backside if you know, a bit like emails, isn't it? When you're younger, you might create an email address and then you'll be a little bit suspicious when you then start to apply for jobs. But you know, it's I think a lot of these things, they just sort of, you have to just evolve and go with the flow a little bit, don't you? It's it's a funny one, that. Just a final question there from Deb about what's the best piece of advice you'd give somebody setting up on their own, or advice that you wish you had been given when you set up, and when you look back at how you started, is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight? James, let's jump onto you for that one.
That is a very good question. I think having a plan is more important than having a name, or even a client to start with, which is also a great starting point if you can have that. But just a plan of like what your aim is with it all, especially if you're starting like a studio rather than freelancing. Obviously with the freelancing thing, you know, you move around and like see what you like and what you don't like, say yes and no to things as you get better. But when you're building a studio or a micro studio, I think it's good to kind of say, well, I'm going to concentrate maybe on this style of work or type of work, like whether that's branding or websites. Also who you can bring in, like building up that network of people, and then having an accountant. The accountant is super important. When
you mentioned earlier, James, about there's a lot of people starting agencies now, or going self-employed, micro agencies, or whatever it might we reference it as. Do you think it's important to look at niching a bit more, or is it just go with whatever you think? Because there's so many, it's quite difficult to stand out, isn't it?
I don't know. I think it depends on what you actually like doing. Like if you work on your own, you don't want to do stuff that you don't like doing, right? Like Craig, you kind of focus on making websites. I focus on making logos. you know, like you do what you want to do, and I think you find your niche that way.
Yeah. Jason, just come to you for that question about advice. I'll just refresh it. Was so what piece of advice would you like when you would you give somebody setting up on their own, and what would you have done differently looking back?
I like the idea of a plan. I never really had one, but so that would have been a good bit of advice. I think accountant, yes, for me, professional advice, even informally, is really good. And when you can afford it, have an accountant. And also don't pass up small opportunities. You know, you don't know what something's going to lead to. And in my history, if you look through those, it's like meeting people in real life, not design world. You know, you meet people and you just don't know who they know and what might happen. And you might meet your future partner, or you might meet a business contact. And through working as well, the smallest opportunities sometimes has led to really quite large projects in the future. And that really is just about people. I think it's about meeting people, getting on with people, having a tiny bit of work here or there, and then suddenly they leave, they go somewhere else, big thing happens. And it's happened a number of times. So don't ignore the smallest weird opportunities that you get sometimes, particularly when you're starting out. You know, it gives you work, it gets you some creative stuff to do, and you just don't know where that's going to go. So yeah, don't ignore the small things.
I think I've said this a lot, but that's a real good advice. And it's also a good thing to talk about in more depth in future, because I hear a lot of stuff where people sort of reference it's got to be a certain budget size, which is normally really unachievable for a lot of people. So that idea of starting out and taking smaller things and not know where it leads is really important, I think, because it's it can be basically the foundation for a business to be successful or not, can't it? And if you aim too high straight away, then you might not always get it. Final question from Christopher's just popped up. The business plan has been mentioned. So would you recommend writing a business plan, or is this something that any of you have done? Jason, that's seems your...
No, I never have. I'm sure if I had bigger ambition, it would be a good idea. But I haven't particularly got big ambition to grow it as a company. You know, I don't particularly want to employ someone. I never have done that yet. I don't think I will. I'm comfortable with a network model. So maybe a marketing strategy would be more useful for me, I think. You know, how to market yourself, how to sell yourself, how to win things. You know, it's all of that idea might be more useful, I think. But a business plan with the broader financial things that implies to me, not really. But I'm sure I'm sure someone would disagree with that.
Yeah, I think I only did one because that's the only way I could get a business bank account at the time. It was literally a sheet of A4, probably a paragraph of lies, basically. Craig, what about you? Since yours is very fresh.
Yeah, I didn't have one. I thought about doing one, like a kind of backdated one, but I think because personally, I'd already been in the industry for like 10 years or longer, than like 15, 17 years before I kind of changed what I do. So I kind of felt like I already knew what I was doing. So it probably, I just didn't. But I'm looking at potentially setting up some sort of other business that's nothing to do with design. I think I would definitely probably write one, more just to kind of get to know the kind of process of the product or whatever it is you're kind of going to do and stuff like that. But yeah, for me, because I was already doing what I was doing, I probably just felt like I didn't need to, because it was kind of happening already. So it was kind of like too late almost.
Yeah, and I think also there's also a lot of people don't necessarily always realise that so many businesses are just started like quite immediately, you know, really quick, and for necessities purposes, need to pay your mortgage, fed up of your job, sort of thing. It's not always necessarily a huge big plan behind it, and it's not always that well thought through either. Sort of evidence of that. So it's I think, like you say, backdating things and maybe revisiting stuff, after a period of time, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it might be, you can then start to then figure it out and evolve it from there.
I think you could write goals. I could still write some goals about, what type of clients I want to work with, or whether I want to take someone on, or how much kind of revenue I want to make and stuff. But you're probably never going to do those things. And if you do, then great. If you don't, then who cares, sort of thing. But I guess as long as you're happy, or you're doing interesting work, or meeting nice people, then I guess, like, for me, that's all that kind of counts.